Hello, this is Mel Thompson, and this is a podcast in a series of podcasts about political risk. Today I'll be discussing Ukraine and a infusion of cash from the IMF and how this really is not a good indicator of what you should be doing to mitigate your political risks as a foreign direct investor or a company seeking to conduct business in Ukraine. Now, even though the IMF has been a stellar performer when it comes to supporting governments, and we can give you many examples of this, Greece, Spain, so on and so forth. Even though they have done everything they can to help prop up governments, support them, help their economies, there are times when their intent should not be a signal to foreign direct investors that there is a less likelihood of a political risk than there was before the investment was made by the IMF. In other words, the $17.5 billion that the IMF is now putting into Ukraine is still not a indicator in any way, shape, or form that things are going to be fine there, that there is not going to be any more Russian incursions or any future problems with Russia and between Russia and Ukraine. It is not an indicator of that at all. It is more or less a signal, a message that the IMF is sending that we are not going to be giving up on Ukraine. That is fine. It is not a signal to you to let your guard down. Now let's look at a likely scenario that is closer to the current reality than not. A Russian policy of pressure with a focus on implied and actual threats of force. When you look at the dynamic between Russia and the Ukraine, one cannot miss the tensions that has been created by the expropriation of the Crimea by Russia and the blatant Russian support for Ukrainian separatists in the eastern half of that country. No amount of IMF investment is going to mitigate these political risks. Only a firm set of agreements with poison pills that will make breaking them unpalatable will possibly, and I do stress the word possibly, make a difference. Russia is not going to all of a sudden say, well, if the IMF is putting money into the Ukraine, maybe we should back off. The reality is that you do not know what will occur to an investment in Ukraine as long as Russia maintains a hostile posture towards the current Ukrainian government. There could be more incursions by Russian troops, there could be more economic pressure, and there could be an actual war. None of these are out of the question because two of them have already happened, and the third is not out of the realm of possibility. So to understand these as facts and strong possibilities is to understand that relying on the IMF infusion of cash is not an indication of a lower level of political risk in the Ukraine. To the contrary, it is a telegraphed message that is designed to tell the Russians, as I said before, that we are not giving up on this country. That is all it pretty much is. And it's also a hope that this money will be a catalyst and be put there at the right time. So if the Russians do back off, this money will be the springboard that puts Ukraine in a better spot than they were before the Russians decided to back off. There's no indication the Russians are backing off in Ukraine. And that is what the main issue is here. This money does not lessen the political risk that is posed by Russia to the Ukraine. Now, I support the message that the IMF is not giving up on Ukraine. I support that 100%. But I'm not in the business of supporting messages. I'm a political scientist who's in the business of mitigating political risks. And as I can see the same political risks with the same level of higher mitigation not being applied to the same types of risks, I can also see a lot of problems. When you start to back away from your plan to mitigate the political risks that are obvious and evident, even the ones that you don't even know about, when you start to back off because somebody else gave you a tip or somebody else put money into something that you thought may be risky, but evidently you don't think it is risky now because they're putting their money in there. Once you start to think that way, you have basically forfeited all possibility that your mitigation plans are going to be effective and they're going to be at all enforced down the road. You're always going to be second guessing yourself if you think something's going to be more profitable and therefore less likely to need the money invested in risk mitigation. Once you start doing that, you're going to have problems. Now, Ukraine feels that the reforms it has instituted have got them on a road that has secured this money. That is true. But what it has not done is giving you a green light to lessen your vigilance. You need to maintain vigilance as a foreign direct investor or a company that is looking to enter the Ukrainian markets. The IMF investment is not a signal for you to let down your guard. This has been Mel Thompson.